Cooking with whichever salt doesn't really make a difference because every salt is same in terms of health. And we already learnt about this in the previous episode. But according to me, what really matters is being a professional chef or being a certified cook, you need to at least know the basics. You need to know which are the cooking salts that exist, or what are the difference between these cooking salts, or how professional chefs make use of these cooking salts in different cooking applications. And that's the reason in this video today I'll be covering 4 major cooking salts. I'll be talking about how professional chefs make use of these salts, and I'll also be covering the production process of the salts. So chalo, let's start. Welcome to my studio, guys. I'm glad to have you all back, and for all those who are new here, I'm Chef Joseph DeCosta, and this channel is all about food science, cooking techniques, experiments, ingredients, restaurant business. So if you are passionate about cooking, if you're passionate about food, and if you want to be a restaurant owner, then please consider subscribing, and don't forget to click the bell icon so that you don't miss any future videos. So before I start talking about types of salt, I will quickly tell you the production process of salt, or how salt is manufactured. So salts are categorized under 2 categories. One is sea salt, one is rock salt. So as the name indicates, it's obvious that sea salt is harvested from seawater. We all know that. Whereas rock salt is harvested from salt deposits that are found from between 1000 to 3000 feet underground. Now the salt water that's harvested from seawater and underground, this salt water is also known as brine solution or salt solution. Now there are 2 methods to separate salt from this liquid. One is the open air solution, open air evaporation, and the other one is vacuum evaporation. Now I'll not talk much on open air evaporation method because we already are familiar about this method. I'm sure you must have seen salt pans while traveling in train. But according to me, not many are familiar with vacuum evaporation process or how rock salt is produced. Now salt production is carried out through mainly 4 stages. First comes the solution mining, then comes brine treatment, then comes vacuum evaporation, and the last stage is refining. Now let's understand each and every process one by one. Let's understand the first stage of production, that is solution mining. Now in this process, what happens is the salt deposits or salt rocks that are found underground is extracted or is removed from underground, and it is brought to land. And this is done by mainly 2 methods. One is the digging method and second is the pumping method. Now guys, this digging method is used for huge salt deposits. Now when I say huge salt deposits, it means it's bigger than a bungalow. And pumping method is used for small salt deposits, and small salt deposits means the size of a Maruti 800 car. So now let's understand both the methods in detail. Now in the first method, the digging method, huge wells are dug so that heavy machineries can pass through the well and break down the bigger salt rocks into smaller stones. And this method is similar to the construction of metro lines, underground metro lines. So now the second method is pumping method. Now in this method, smaller wells are dug. Now when I say smaller wells, it means that only pipes can get through it and pull out the salt. Now pay attention, this process is very interesting. Let's take a look at this diagram. Now if you notice in this diagram, there are 2 pipes inserted in the same well. Now what they do is, through one pipe they inject water in very high pressure. So with this high pressure water, what happens, the salt stone or salt rock dissolves, and once the salt stone dissolves, this water is then pulled up or pumped up with another pipe, and this both process is carried out simultaneously. Now the second stage of production is treating the salt solution. So the salt solution that's removed from underground is in raw state, and that's the reason it is highly contaminated, and so it is thoroughly washed and it's highly treated with chemicals to remove all the impurities and other contaminants. Now since the salt is going under such harsh treatment, it loses its trace minerals. The treated solution is then sent to the third stage of production, that is the vacuum evaporation process. Now in this process, the salt solution is transferred to multiple airtight vessels. And these vessels are internally connected with each other due to scientific reasons. And then the water from the salt solution is evaporated under vacuum pressure. The vacuum evaporation technique works on a simple principle. So what happens is the boiling temperature of water is reduced drastically by lowering the air pressure inside the airtight vessel. So for example, the sea water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. Now if you go 10,000 feet above the sea level, there the atmospheric pressure is low, and at that level the water will boil at roughly around 75 to 80 degrees Celsius. Now once the water has evaporated from the salt solution, only salt settles down in solid state, and this salt solution is then sent to the fourth stage of production. Now in the fourth stage of production, salt is then ground into tiny crystals, and at the same time trace minerals are added to it. Okay guys, so now I want you to pause the video, take a break, and think if you have any questions, any doubts with regards to the vacuum evaporation process, salt production process, or mining process. And if you feel you have any doubt, then go ahead and write your questions in the comment section below. And you are also free to share your points in case you feel I have missed on anything. Now let's understand the difference between types of salt. So salts are classified into different types because of mainly two reasons. First is the texture of salt, second is their taste profile. Now salts come in different shapes, different color. Some come in flaky texture, then you get diamond texture, then you have a tiny texture like table salt. Then in colors you have bright white color, off-white color, black color, and some are harshly salty, some are mild in taste. Now the structure, texture, shape, size, color, everything of salt depends on mainly two reasons. First is the manufacturing process, whether the salt has undergone harsh treatment or whether it has undergone mild treatment. Now secondly, it depends on the location where the salt solution is harvested from. Now if you harvest the salt solution from Juhu Beach, Mumbai, you will get a black water because the water, sea water over there is black. It's so contaminated. Whereas if you collect the water of any beach outside India, you will get crystal clear water, you will get blue water. And this makes the difference between the taste and color of the salt. Now we'll see how trained cooks or professional chefs use different cooking salts for different cooking applications. The first salt I want to talk about is table salt. Table salt falls under the category of rock salt. And as the name indicates, table salt is supposed to be kept on table in the salt shakers, but mostly 80% of the population cooks with table salt. And just few minutes back we learned why a salt like table salt is bright white in color, or why it's so harsh in taste. So we just learned about all the four stages of salt production. So if you recollect the fourth stage, there were some minerals that were artificially added to salt. Now in case of table salt, there are two more agents that are added to salt. The first is anti-caking agent. Now this agent prevents salt from absorbing moisture and forming lump. Now the second agent is iodine. Now there's a very interesting story behind adding iodine to salt. I would like to tell you about this. Now in the 1920s, many people were lacking iodine in their diet, due to which they started developing swelling in their thyroid gland. Now this condition in medical terms is known as goiter. Now goiter can lead to thyroid cancer, weight gain, poor thinking, and other risky health conditions. So the US government requested the salt manufacturers to add iodine to salt, because without adding salt to your food, you cannot consume your food. And since then, it has become a practice in every country. Professional chefs always like cooking with a coarse salt. Now they will never cook with table salt because of its texture. Apart from texture, I personally don't find any other disadvantages of cooking with table salt. So if you see the texture of table salt, it is just like castor sugar. If you try to pinch it, it's just going to slip and fall away. And in terms of iodine, we are already getting enough iodine from our daily diet, that is through fish, dairy, fruits, vegetables. I personally recommend using table salt only for two applications. One is in the brine solution, because cost wise table salt is cheaper as compared to any other salt. Secondly, table salt dissolves quickly because of its tiny texture. Now according to me, the second application where table salt suits better is baking. Because of its density, it works perfectly for volume measurement. Now if you take sea salt as an example, the shape of sea salt is bigger in size, but weight wise it is lighter. Now if you take 1 tablespoon of sea salt, you will see that the tablespoon is full, but weight wise it is not perfectly weighed. Okay, so if you are confused, try getting the answer on your own by doing this at home. take 1 tablespoon of table salt, 1 tablespoon of kosher salt, and 1 tablespoon of sea salt. So once these 3 salts are ready in 1 tablespoon, what you can do is then measure it on a weighing scale. What you will notice is table salt has weighed 17 to 20 grams, kosher salt will weigh 8 to 10 grams, and the last salt, sea salt, will weigh 9 to 12 grams. So this is the difference. So it depends on the texture. The weight depends on the texture. Okay, suppose let's say you are baking a recipe and that recipe specifies the type of salt. It might say you need to add kosher salt, sea salt, or any coarse salt. Now let's assume you are not having this type of salt at home. So what you can do is, in this case, you can substitute it with table salt. But you need to ensure that table salt that you're using, it has to be measured by weight, not by volume. So to avoid any errors, you can make use of this conversion chart that's easily available on the internet. Now the second salt I want to talk about is kosher salt. Kosher salt is the salt that every professional chef loves to use while cooking, and we'll see why. Kosher salt is the cousin of table salt, as it falls under the category of rock salt because it is harvested from underground salt deposits. But kosher salt is still different from table salt because of mainly its texture and its taste. We'll see how. Now if you taste the table salt, you will notice that the taste is harshly salty and you won't be able to keep it for long into your mouth. And this is because, as we learned earlier, that table salt is harshly treated and there are so many chemicals added to it, and that's why when you taste it, it's harshly salty and you feel as if you have tasted a chemical. Now kosher salt has a very different taste as compared to table salt, and this is because it is mildly processed and it is refined without additives, and this makes kosher salt less salty in taste. And that's the reason it is very difficult or impossible for anybody to over-salt their dish while cooking with kosher salt. So I guess now you know Salt Bae uses which type of salt and why he sprinkles this amount of salt on his steak, that we can't even imagine doing it with table salt. Now as I mentioned earlier, the major difference between table salt and kosher salt are their textures. Table salt comes in fine crystals, whereas kosher salt comes in coarse crystals or bigger diamond shaped crystals. And that's the reason kosher salt is considered to be the favorite salt of every professional chefs. Because of its texture, it is easy to handle or easy to pick. It gives a firm grip to the chefs while cooking or to sprinkle on the food. So friends, now we'll see how kosher salt got its name and why it's known as kosher salt. So before I proceed, I want to request you to pause the video and share some information about kosher diet, whatever you know. You can share this by writing in the comment section below. So everyone who are related to food industry or hospitality industry needs to be aware about the special diets. So these special diets are categorized under 3 groups. First comes the lifestyle diet, then comes the health diet, and the last one is religion diet. Now if you want to learn more about this, I would encourage you to send in your votes by sending me a direct message on my Instagram account. I would love to make an exclusive video on this particular topic. Okay, so in this video I'm only going to share some specific information on how kosher is related to salt. So the word kosher is actually shortened from the Hebrew name Koshering. Now this name is given by the Jews to the kind of food they eat. And in Hebrew, the meaning of koshering is fit to eat. Now when I say fit to eat, it obviously means that there must be some guidelines or certain rules that are to be followed to eat certain type of food. So let's learn more about it. Now if you go through the detailed rule book of koshering, you will understand that there are so many things that the Jewish needs to keep in mind before consuming their food. And trust me, I have personally gone through the rule book, and it's so confusing and so complex for us to understand. Like for example, a person following kosher diet is supposed to cook his food and eat his food in separate utensils. Or if he is consuming non-veg, like meat, fish, or any bird, so this has to be butchered as per the method prescribed in the law. Or let's say he wants to order a food from outside. So the food that is getting delivered to him, the package must contain kosher seal. Only then he can consume the food. Now while I was researching about kosher diet, I also went through the guidelines or the rule book of Koshering. So there I found something interesting which I thought I should be sharing it with you. So the person following kosher diet cannot just have any animal, bird or fish he likes. They can consume only those animals, those birds and those fish who meet specific criteria according to the law. So there are some steps they need to follow to decide whether this particular animal falls under the kosher diet or not. So let's see how they do it. So now to understand this, we will talk about land animals as an example. Now there are varieties of animals. Now how does one decide whether which animal is good for kosher diet and which are banned under kosher diet? So the number one criteria is to see whether the animal is having split hoof or not. Now split hoof, for example, will take a goat or sheep. See this picture. Its foot or hoof is divided into two. It's split into two. Now we have camel also who has a hoof. Now see the picture of camel. It has a hoof but it's not divided in two. It's not split. Okay, so now if you Google, you'll find out there are so many animals that fall under the split hoof category. But not all animals are safe or allowed to be eaten under kosher diet. Now the second stage or second criteria to decide is whether the animal is cud chewing animal or not. Cud chewing also means ruminating, or in simple language, where we need to see whether the animal gets its 100% nutrition from plants, fruits, vegetables. Now let's take an example of pig. A pig has split hooves, but you know from where it gets its nutrition. Okay, we already learned about two stages. The first criteria is the animal should have split hooves. Second is the animal should be cud chewing animal. Now the third criteria is we should be having the medical fitness certificate of the animal. Now once these three principles are met, the animal is then taken for slaughtering. Now the slaughtering is not done by any Tom, Dick and Harry. There is a specially trained, Kushrut trained butcher who knows all the specific laws on how to butcher a particular animal. Now once the animal is slaughtered, the meat is still not ready to eat. And this is because of the primary rule in the kashrut law. Now what is the primary rule? The primary rule is prohibition of eating blood. So the meat is considered fit to eat only once it undergoes the koshering process. Now in this process, the blood from the meat is completely removed before it is cooked. Now there are three steps in koshering process. Let's see one by one. The first step is washing the meat under running water. Second is soaking the meat by submerging it in room temperature water for about 30 to 60 minutes. And the last step, an important step, is salting the meat. Now there are some guidelines that is supposed to be followed on choosing the right salt for koshering process. Let's say for example, if you use table salt. Now because of its fine crystals, what will happen? The table salt will immediately dissolve inside the meat and it will fail to draw out blood. Secondly, if you use a bigger crystal salt, then what will happen? It will just fall off the meat and it again won't solve our purpose. Now, how should our salt be? What texture are we looking for? So if we have medium-sized crystal, what will happen? This medium-sized crystal won't fall off, won't dissolve quickly. It will just stick to the surface of the meat. And once it sticks to the surface, it helps in extracting 100% blood out of the meat. Now this medium-sized crystal salt is known as koshering salt. And this is how the word kosher derived from the koshering process. Now guys, I would like to ask you one question. Try to attempt this one. Now this question came to my mind while I was researching about kosher salt. So the question is that there is so much of money, time, energy invested to manufacture this salt or study this salt by professionals. And finally, they are using it for religious purpose. If they are doing it for religious purpose, then why are they selling it to everyone in the world? And why do we need it if it is for religious purpose? It's none of our business. So please drop your answers in the comment section. Okay, now it's my time to answer. Now technically, kosher salt comes in two different types. One is kosher certified salt and the second one is kosher style salt. Now let's see how to determine the difference between both. Which one is for us to use and which one is for the koshering process. So as the name indicates, kosher style salt is known only for its texture. Now because of its medium-sized texture, we just spoke about it, because of its medium-sized texture, everyone loves to cook with it, and that's why it's the favorite salt of professional chefs. Now kosher style salt has no connection, no link with the koshering process or with the Jews. Whereas kosher certified salt, it means that there are special agencies who verify whether the salt is meeting certain guidelines as per the koshering process, whether the salt is undergone or is handled or it's produced as per the law. And how you get to know whether this is verified or not? Every packet of kosher certified salt will have a stamp, kosher stamp on it, verified by the agencies. The third salt I will be talking about is sea salt. Sea salt has always been my favorite salt since the time I became a certified cook, and that is because of mainly two reasons. One, because of its natural minerals that's present in seawater. Secondly, because of its texture. Now, I personally consider sea salt as an all-rounder salt because it is available in market in every texture you want. It comes in the texture of table salt, fine grain. Then it comes in medium-sized texture that we just spoke about, kosher salt. Then it comes in larger texture that's used in pickling. It also comes in flaky texture that's crunchy, and it's been used in as a finishing salt. Now let's learn more about finishing salt. So before I jump to the finishing salt, I want to tell you something more about sea salt. Now there are many people who are aware or who are educated about the benefits in sea salt, but still they are not switching from their regular salt or table salt to sea salt because of mainly its cost. Now sea salt is expensive because the harvesting process of sea salt is labor intensive, and because it is labor intensive, it becomes expensive, and that's why many people can't afford it, and so they are still stuck at using table salt. Now the last salt for today is finishing salt, and as I already mentioned that finishing salt is a type of sea salt, and cost wise it is very expensive, and this salt is used only by professional restaurants. Now you'll not find the salts in the cooking area of restaurant kitchens, but this salt is kept at the restaurant pass counter, kitchen pass counter. Now this one's for all who doesn't know what's kitchen pass counter. So whenever you go to a restaurant and you order your food, you must have seen once your food is ready, the waiter doesn't go inside the kitchen to get your food. There is a small place inside the wall where the food is passed to the waiter and then he gets it to you. Now this small place, this small space in the wall is known as kitchen pass counter. Now here's something interesting about finishing salt. Finishing salt is not used while cooking the dish. It is used after the dish is cooked or once the dish is ready. Now what happens is, once the customer places his order, one copy of KOT goes inside the kitchen and the line cook prepares the dish, cooks the food, he plates it and he sends the food to the kitchen pass counter. And at this counter you will find the sous chef or the executive chef waiting for the food. Once the food has come, the sous chef, he'll take the finishing salt, he'll garnish the dish first, he will take the finishing salt and he will sprinkle some amount on the dish. Now finishing salt is not sprinkled on the dish because it has less salt in it or the line cook has undersalted the food. It is added because it gives a wonderful crunch and it enhances the flavor of the food. Finishing salt is mostly used on steaks, pizzas, pastas, salads, breads, cookies, desserts, ice cream. So friends, we are almost at the end of the video now. We have learned 4 different types of cooking salt and we also seen the production process of salt. Now there is so much of information I still want to give you, but it isn't possible in so less time. So I'm sure you definitely must be having some questions. So I would request you to go ahead and write down all the questions. I would love to read and respond to each one of them. So that's it guys, it's time to end the video, and even if you are an experienced cook and you have watched this video, I'm sure you must have learned something new from this video. So please show some love, please support by liking the video so that it performs well in the YouTube algorithm. And guys, recently I was motivated by one of my mentor. and that's the reason you'll find me so active on Instagram nowadays. And I've also started making educational videos on YouTube, where I share my experience, my knowledge, whatever I've learned from my seniors, whatever I research, whatever I experiment in my test kitchen. If you want to learn anything related to cooking or food business, then I feel you should consider subscribing my YouTube channel and also follow my Instagram account. So that's it, guys. Thank you for watching this video. I'll see you soon with another video. Meanwhile, take care, be safe, and don't stop learning.